Hi, welcome to True Colors audiobook. This is chapter 16. In the last episode, Cassie, who is now in Richmond, Virginia, was given the choice of where to spend her unjust imprisonment: in a refurbished colonial stockade that is serving as a prison hospital for Union soldiers, or a tobacco factory serving as a women's prison. She opted for the stockade in hopes that maybe she can find some purpose in all of this, rather than merely existing. Where will that choice lead her? Let's listen and watch.
True Colors, Chapter 16. Shortly after dawn, Major Justin St. John managed to procure a buttered biscuit and some water for me, then escorted me to the prison hospital compound 7 miles from the Richmond city limits. Once the site of a colonial palisade, it had fallen into disrepair, and like a few of its smaller cousins, it was being reconditioned as a prison. Weeks earlier, prisoner laborers had been requisitioned from other camps, and the work was near completion. As last-minute construction took place in the early morning, the doctor walked me around the inside of the stockade. The walls were constructed of immense posts, 15-foot-high, broad tree trunks sharply pointed at the top, most of which had been replaced or reinforced due to decay. These stately sentinels surrounded a 4.5-acre common, which now contained several refurbished buildings, including a commandant's office, a kitchen, a barrack for the less acutely ill prisoners, and, of course, the infirmary. A walkway ran along the top of much of the wall's perimeter, and blockhouses stood atop the corners of the east wall that held the colossal gates. I was given a quick rundown of regulations and limitations I would be expected to follow, and was shown what areas to avoid under any and all circumstances. The doctor explained that according to the rules of warfare, prisoners must be protected, issued proper food, clothing, and shelter, offered a reasonable amount of fuel and bedding, and were entitled to medical attendance. In regular prison camps, it was permitted to require prisoners to labor as long as it was not on military works. Attempting to escape was not considered a crime. A prisoner would not be punished for it, but could be confined with greater strictness. He emphasized that these rules were followed as best as could be expected in most camps, but violations were inevitable. Every prison had its share of guards who looked upon their charges not as prisoners of war, but as felons, and treated them as such. I drew many stares and wolf calls from the laborers and guards we passed. It must have been a very long time since some of them had seen any woman. I certainly was no vision of beauty, walking about with a man's raincoat wrapped about me, my hair unkempt and tied back with a string, my mud-caked bare feet sloshing about in the still moist ground. "Better get used to it," the surgeon advised as another whistle rang out. "I don't think I'll have to. I probably won't be here long." "Probably not," he said, but in a tone that implied he didn't believe it for 1 minute. Major St. John decided that my cell would be the old and as yet unrenovated colonial quartermaster's cabin, 30 yards across the common from the infirmary. Standing in the doorway, I was dealt a crushing blow. Not that I expected much in the way of luxury, but this was hardly fit to inhabit. I wondered if a warehouse or tobacco factory wouldn't have been more palatable. The single room was about 20 feet square and made of single-ply boards. On the floor lay a shredded, striped mattress barren of linen, a rusted tin can with about 100 holes poked in it and a melted candle inside hung on a nail near the door and served as my only light fixture. There was a small desk and chair, and an irregular stone fireplace with a narrow wooden beam mantel. The only 2 windows were on the east wall, were a foot square, above head level, and would provide little light once the sun rose in the sky. "This is the only structure where you'll have privacy, something you wouldn't get at Castle Godwin, and you'll be spending much of your time across the yard in the infirmary." I took only a few laggard steps into the room before becoming sickened in my stomach. "Please, God, send Michael with good news today. I don't belong here." I raced past the doctor to the outside where there was air to breathe, air recently cleansed by the heavy rains. He followed me outside. I'm sorry about the conditions here. I wasn't expecting to be quartering a woman. I promise you this place will be cleaned up and have decent lighting and bedding by the afternoon. Last, but hardly least on our tour was the infirmary, and we trekked through the mud to a white clapboard building. My assistant surgeon hasn't arrived yet, but you can meet the medical stewards and your charges. You have patients in there already, before reconstruction is even complete? We had no choice. Other prison hospitals are overflowing, as is this one already. Our capacity here is 60 beds, but we've already got 72 men sick enough to be admitted. And that's just the infirmary. There's also the barrack for those whose conditions aren't as serious. And I should warn you that infirmary detail is not a highly sought-after assignment among the troops. Most of the stewards rotate through on a monthly basis, aren't medically trained, and, I'm afraid, don't always perform their duties with much enthusiasm. How about you? Don't you hate having to care for the enemy? I don't consider a fallen Union soldier my enemy, and I love what I do, no matter who is the recipient of my services. No, the only thing wrong with this assignment is it's too far from the front. I'm waiting for an appointment to a field hospital as a regimental surgeon, but that might not come for some time. The conditions in the infirmary were not much better than my quarters. To the left of the entryway were a medicine room and a supply room, neither of which held many provisions as yet, although replenishments were due soon. To the right was a large ward lit with sunshine beaming through a half-dozen tall windows. There were 4 rows of 15 cots, all of them occupied. More men lay on blankets or straw mats on the floor. Half of the cots had linen on them, and the floor was swept clean, but the room was not what I would consider sanitary. Insects were prolific, but the doctor assured me that boughs of cedar he ordered would take care of much of that problem. And although I was long used to olfactory stews of pungent medicines and organisms, the odor was repulsive. The patients who were conscious enough to notice me gawked. I felt an immediate kinship with these men. Here we all were, imprisoned together, 7 miles from the very heartbeat of the Confederacy. From among the low groanings and periodic gasps of pain or shock at seeing me came a loud cry from a man who bolted upright on his cot 2 rows away. A steward in that area took his time in getting to him, then told him to shut up and lie down. He pressed his hand against the patient's chest and shoved him back onto the bed. "Private!" Major St. John shouted. "You know better." "What's wrong with that man's foot?" I asked. "Necrosis. I performed a vascular resection in hopes of keeping it viable, but I'll be amputating later today." "Can't you give him some laudanum?" "If we had any." "You don't have any?" "There's some morphine on I hastened through the narrow passages between the cots, finally reaching the one that shook from the writhing of the young man occupying it. The steward stood across the cot and looked on as I leaned over the soldier and laid my hand against his fiery and sweat-soaked chest. "What's his name?" I asked. "How should I know?" I moved my hand to his grimaced face and brushed aside moist strands of strawberry blonde hair. "Hey, soldier." His pale blue eyes crept open. Who are you?" I dug deep for one of the essential smiles I kept in reserve. "I'm Cassie. I'm here for you." He stared at me in horror. "No, dear God, no. I don't want to die. Please don't let her take me." The steward chuckled. I threw him an icy glare. "Go get some clean bandages and some chlorine water. That dressing just got changed 3 days ago. Besides, the leg's getting hacked off today anyway." "Do as she says, Private." The surgeon now stood at the bottom of the cot. "But Doc, now." The surgeon moved to the side of the cot. "I'm grieved at the status of this dressing. I haven't been here for a couple of days." I stroked the soldier's cheek. "Don't be afraid. I'm not here to take you out of this world. I'm here to help you stay in it. Now, tell me your name." His body tensed as pain gripped him again. "McCarthy. From sturdy Irish stock, no doubt, and I'm here to give you a chance to prove it." The steward returned with the dressing supplies. I leaned over my patient. "McCarthy, listen to me carefully. I'm going to change this bandage. It's going to hurt, and there's no medicine to kill the pain. A hardy Irishman like yourself should be able to keep himself in check." "It hurts so bad." He was nearly weeping. "I know it does, but your cries will scare the other men who may be facing the same thing. You have to try to control it, okay?" I'll try." I rolled up the sleeves of the bulky, oversized raincoat. "I'll work as quickly as I can, and I want you to talk to me while I work." "What about?" "Let's start with your first name." I began to unwrap the sticky, soiled cotton bandage from his foot. "Stephen." "Oh, I have a good friend named Stephen. He's a doctor up north. So where do you hail from, Stephen McCarthy?" "Illinois." "Have you a sweetheart back in Illinois?" "Yeah." "What's her name?" "Colleen." "Oh, an Irish lass 'tis for Stephen McCarthy, eh?" I managed to remove the putrid dressing without vomiting. The many hundreds of dressings I had changed in the past 2 years notwithstanding, I was sure that had there been any remnant of biscuit left in my stomach, it would have come up. I had the steward pour the chlorine water over my hands. Major St. John observed me without speaking or intervening in any way. The entire ward, in fact, had gone silent as ambulatory patients gathered in the rows around McCarthy's cot, and those bedridden sat up and stretched their necks for a better view. I wiped away the pus from the badly mottled foot and kept McCarthy talking the whole time. What color was Colleen's hair? Her eyes? Did she have freckles? Did he like freckles? What kind of work did he do before he enlisted? He only spoke if I asked him questions, so I kept them coming. The pain, I knew, was excruciating, but he never once cried out. When the foot was redressed, I rinsed my hands and took hold of his, surprised he was still conscious. "I'm sorry for how much that hurt, McCarthy." "It weren't nothin', Miss Cassie, not for a fella of sturdy Irish stock." As I worked my way back through the masses of cots to leave the ward, hands reached out and touched me as if to see if I were real. One old man smiled up at me as I passed. "I think I done died and went to heaven." The major smiled at me. "Didn't I tell you?" As we completed the tour of the infirmary, Major St. John said, "Miss Golden, I must say in all honesty that you've left me awestruck. Your skills are impressive, and I've never seen any medical attendant radiate such confidence and control. There wasn't a thing you could do to heal that boy's wound or abate his pain, but you made him feel safe, and that's what he needed right then." We exited the infirmary. Michael was crossing the yard carrying a brown bundle. His pace quickened when he saw the doctor and me. Without so much as acknowledging Major St. John, he took my hand and led me away from the infirmary. "Michael, where are they putting you?" I motioned toward the quartermaster's cabin. "Come and change into some decent clothes." There was no further need to ask. He would have told me first thing if the news from Jefferson Davis was good. "Some digs." He peered into the cabin from the doorway. "Just look at this place. It's squalid. How could he have even considered bringing you to such a place as this?" We entered and he closed the door. "Did you notice that the lock on this door is broken?" I hadn't. He threw the package on the desk. "There's a dress and some shoes and stockings. They should fit just fine unless you've grown since I left Washington. And there's a towel to wipe off the mud you've been wading through." I removed a beige dress with brown trim from the package. "I'd like to change now, please." "Go ahead." "Michael, I'm your husband, remember?" I looked at him with indignation. All right, I'll wait outside. Are they going to fix this lock?" He jiggled the rusted and broken metal pieces on the door, but went out without waiting for an answer. It felt good to be in clean clothes, and to wear shoes. I let my hair out of the string, the mussed waves falling where they may. When I opened the door, Michael was right there, standing guard. He offered me his hand, but I didn't take it. I did not miss the look of regret it brought to his face, but I was so unsure of him, and it was breaking my heart. We walked to a semi-secluded spot near the west wall of the compound. As far as I could tell, it held the only few square yards of grass in the entire common. "He's not going to free me, is he?" He slowed his steps. "No." Having expected the worst did nothing to soften the blow of hearing it stated as fact. I felt hollow inside, and helpless, and enraged. But it's not fair, and what they're doing is illegal. They haven't even charged me with anything. The president says that Lincoln has suspended habeas corpus whenever it suited his purposes, and he's taking the liberty of doing the same. He says they can't afford to let you go with what you're privy to. I stood motionless for several moments, my eyes taking in the prison compound that was to be my home for how long? I wonder how many colonists' footsteps trod within these palisades a century and a half ago. I can almost see them walking about, carrying out their daily routines. Now I am being forced to continue on in the history of this place that was started long ago. Isn't that how you put it that first day we went to the Great Falls? He lowered his head and nodded. We walked back to the building where I was to be quartered. Major St. John stood waiting a few yards beyond it. "Can I see you for a minute?" I went to speak with him. Michael kept a watchful eye despite my casting back an irritated glance. "What's the word from Jeff Davis?" "The word is no." "I'm sorry, and I truly mean that. This really is no place for you. Perhaps you would be better off in the city where there are women. I'm staying here, thanks to you." "To me?" "You told me that even though I couldn't help McCarthy, I made him feel safe. All of those men sacrificed that feeling while fighting for me and my country. If I seem to bring some measure of it back to them, then here is where I'll stay." "That's very noble of you, Miss Golden. And speaking of Corporal McCarthy, he is wishing you'll be there during his surgery today. He says if you're there when we put him under the chloroform, he knows he'll wake up, and I could use your expertise for the amputation." "What time?" "I'll be starting around noon. Tell him I'll be there. It'll bring him considerable relief." He started to go, then said, "By the way, that's a nice dress. Will there be anything else, Major?" "Now that you mention it, there is one more thing. Since we'll be working closely together now, would it be all right if we exchanged our Christian names? In the midst of all this, formalities seem so ridiculous." Under the circumstances, I agreed it would be appropriate. "Great, then I'll see you around noon." Noon. The vision of Michael turning his hat over in his hands and repeating that word the first night we met in the hospital flashed before my mind's eye. Until yesterday, I believed that night was the beginning of a romance that would survive any test that might come our way. But it was only the beginning of an illusion. I returned to the cabin where Michael was digging at the broken lock with a small knife. There was no question he'd been keeping one eye on the doctor and me. What did he want? "He wants me to assist with an operation at noon." "Is that all?" "He also expressed his admiration for your taste in ladies' dresses." His eyes narrowed and he shook his head. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. Why the hostility toward Justin? "Justin? You've known the man a few hours and already you're using first names? Whatever happened to propriety? There's a war on. Sometimes propriety just has to go out the window." He gave up in frustration on the lock. At least I thought it had to do with the lock. I stepped inside the cabin and looked around my prison home. Under better circumstances, the fireplace could be considered quaint. The desk and chair weren't much to behold. I hoped that Justin's pledge to supply me with a new cot was one promise that would be kept. The door closed and I turned to face Michael. He folded his knife and slid it into a back pocket. His eyes remained fixed on mine. He began to unbutton his tunic. I watched with disquietude as he removed it, threw it on the chair, and proceeded to unbutton his shirt. He pulled the shirt tails out from his pants, exposing to my eyes for the first time a generous portion of his torso. Then he worked at unbuttoning his cuffs. What are you doing? I'm your husband, aren't I? The shirt was removed and tossed. My eyes wandered unchecked across the span of his chest and along the length of the arms that Sister Teresa had so admired. I began to tremble. It's my responsibility to provide for you. I'll dig a privy hole first, then get this lock out and go to town for a replacement. I'll bring back some food and more clothing and other necessities, and some materials for an outhouse along with a couple of men to help build it. He turned and opened the door, then stopped and turned again, eyeing me. What did you think I was going to do? Nothing. His expression took the form of astonishment mingled with insult. Do you really think I would do that to you? Now? In this place? He glimpsed the torn, shabby mattress on the dusty floor. On that? My eyes were downcast, so great was my shame. He slammed the door behind him when he left to take care of his husbandly responsibilities. I assisted in McCarthy's operation at noon, then spent a couple of hours learning my way around the infirmary and getting to know some of the patients' names and conditions. When I returned from those duties, the privy hole was dug, the lock removed, and Michael was gone.
Cassie's final hope of being freed has been laid to rest, so the stockade is where she'll be for how long? She had quite an eventful day, and Michael has been busy performing his husbandly responsibilities, trying to make things at least a little more palatable for her there. But honestly, how much can conditions improve, either at the prison or in their relationship? Join them next time and find out. Thanks for watching. See you then.